I walked back into the house, dog-tired and starving. My daughter-in-law had actually slapped a padlock on the refrigerator door. "Stop eating us out of the house and home," she sneered. "From now on, you're going to earn every single bite." I didn't say a word. I just reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out an old business card, and silently handed it to my son. He looked at it, and his face immediately went pale with fear. Now, let's pick up the story. October in Atlanta, Georgia, is that time of year when the city finally gives in to the mercy of the gray sky. A cold, fine rain had been drumming against the pane of the kitchen window for 3 days straight. I was sitting at the DIL, sipping hot tea and watching my grandkids. Preston, my 7-year-old commander-in-chief, was deeply focused, building some incredible spaceport out of construction blocks. And 5-year-old Ava was coloring a sun in her sketch pad, huge, yellow, and desperately out of place in this autumn gloom. These two were my main purpose, my quiet joy, ever since my Vivian passed away 3 years ago. Living in my son's house had become my only option. It wasn't about money. My pension was decent. It was about the ringing emptiness in my own apartment, where every corner reminded me of her. Helping with the grandkids, picking Preston up from school, taking Ava to pre-K. These simple routines kept me afloat, preventing me from sinking entirely into my memories. The apartment door slammed, and Dave, my son, walked into the kitchen. His face was beaming. He tossed his wet coat onto a chair and hugged his wife, Melissa, who was just pulling something out of the oven. "That's it! I got the offer," he announced loudly. "Starting Monday, I'm the senior project engineer at Apex Dynamics." Melissa gasped and threw her arms around his neck. "Dave, I knew it! I believed in you." I stood up, too, and shook my son's hand. "Congratulations, son. That's a serious company. Sterling is a smart man. He doesn't play around." Simon Sterling. We hadn't seen each other in maybe 10 years, but I clearly remembered that sharp, young guy who came to my aeronautics lab 105 division as a young specialist. I was his first mentor, and I taught him a lot. Later, he left to start his own business, and from what I'd heard, became very successful. A month ago, while I was going through some old notebooks, I stumbled across his number. I called him up just to see how he was doing. We talked for almost an hour, and at the end of the conversation, I casually mentioned that my son was looking for a more serious job. "Send over his resume," Simon replied, without hesitation. "For a talented engineer coming from Ken Whitaker, the light is always green at my company." I didn't tell Dave about it. Why bother? Let him think he achieved everything on his own merit. "Can you imagine the salary there?" he continued excitedly. "It's almost 3 times more than the old place, Mel. We can finally—" He stopped short, but I knew what he meant. "We can finally afford everything his wife had ever dreamed of." Melissa was already glowing with happiness. She twirled around the kitchen, making plans. "Finally, we can do that renovation I've been talking about, and we'll get a new car, and we're going on vacation, not to Mexico, but to the Caribbean." She used the word "we," but I felt that there was no place for me in that "we" anymore. She glanced at me, and I caught something new in her eyes, a cold, calculating expression. "Yes, Dave," she said, and her voice suddenly turned businesslike. "With your new status, a lot of things have to change, even around the house." That evening, after the kids were asleep, I retreated to my room. My small world centered around my old tube radio, a rare antique, handed down from my own father. I had been restoring it for over a year. It was a complex, meticulous job that required absolute precision. Today, I was working on the power supply unit. The soldering iron in my hand heated up, giving off the faint smell of rosin. I was carefully soldering a new capacitor, and the monotonous work was calming. But my thoughts kept drifting back to the conversation in the kitchen. What did Melissa mean about changing things around the house? I put the soldering iron down and looked at the photograph on the table. Vivian and I on our wedding day. She had told me then, "Ken, I know you'll be the best father in the world. Just be a little softer with Dave. He's so sensitive, so easily led." She was right. Dave had always been a good son, but he lacked my backbone. He was easily swayed by others, and now his main influence was Melissa. The door to my room cracked open. Melissa was standing on the threshold in a new silk robe. "Kenneth, you still up?" she asked in an overly sweet, polite tone. "No, Melissa, not asleep. Did something happen?" She walked in and surveyed my room. Her gaze lingered on the radio. "Just messing with your junk, huh?" she snickered. "Listen, I wanted to talk about something. Since Dave is going to be earning so much now, I don't think we need your help with the kids anymore." My blood ran cold. "I mean, I'll probably quit my job and focus on the house and the kids, taking them to their clubs and activities. And you can finally relax. You're not getting any younger. After all, you can dedicate time to yourself, to your hobbies." She spoke the right, caring words, but I heard something else entirely. She wasn't offering me a break. She was pushing me away from my grandkids, from the only role that gave my life meaning. She said, "Your help is no longer needed." But what I heard was, "You are no longer needed." "I understand, Melissa," I said quietly. She nodded, satisfied. "That's good. I'm glad we see eye to eye. Good night." She left, leaving behind the faint trace of expensive perfume. I was alone. The smell of rosin mixed with the scent of her perfume. Two worlds that could no longer coexist. I looked at the radio. Something in the circuit wasn't right. One of the contacts was loose. This small, almost unnoticeable fault could cause the entire complex system to fail. Just like in our family, something had broken. And I felt like this was only the beginning. Life in the apartment truly changed starting that Monday. Dave left for his new job early in the morning and came back late at night, tired but pleased. He was fully immersed in an interesting project, and I was genuinely happy for him. But the atmosphere at home was different. It was steeped in a barely perceptible chill that came from Melissa. Just as she'd promised, she quit her job. Now she was the lady of the house, and she never missed a chance to underline it. It all began with small things. First, she moved my mug, the same old one with the chipped handle that Vivian had given me, from a visible spot on the shelf to the darkest corner. "It ruins the look," Melissa explained, not looking at me. "I ordered a new dinner set. Everything needs to be in a single style." I kept silent. It was just a mug, but it was my mug. Then she took on the living room. My old armchair, worn out but so comfortable, where I loved to read in the evenings, simply disappeared one morning. "Where's the armchair?" I asked when I couldn't find it in its usual spot. "I sent it to my parents' mountain retreat," Melissa replied, polishing a new glass shelf. "It absolutely didn't fit the new design. Dave and I are going to pick out new furniture tomorrow. Something modern, Scandinavian style." "But that was my favorite chair," I said. "Kenneth," she sighed, "don't be like a child. It's just a thing. You have to get rid of old junk." I kept silent again. I went to my room and closed the door. I sat on the bed and stared at the wall for a long time. She called the chair junk, the chair where I had rocked baby Dave in my arms, the chair where Vivian had knitted her warm sweaters. She wasn't just throwing out furniture. She was throwing out my memory, my life piece by piece. I realized this wasn't just a desire to update the decor. It was a methodical process of displacement. She was erasing all traces of my presence, making the house hers and only hers. Every evening, I sat in my room, hunched over the radio. The work was progressing slowly. I needed a rare, double-triode vacuum tube, a 6N2P. I searched for it on every forum and finally found one from a collector in Omaha. I arranged for it to be shipped. This small event became a whole adventure for me, a breath of fresh air in the suffocating atmosphere of the apartment. I waited for that package like a child waits for a Christmas present. It was something that was mine, real, something I could control. Meanwhile, Melissa was increasingly embracing the role of a society lady. Expensive vases appeared in the house, along with abstract paintings on the walls that, according to her, cost a fortune. She began hosting dinners for important people, Dave's colleagues, his new bosses. At these dinners, my role was that of the silent, elderly relative. "This is Dave's father, Kenneth." She would introduce me to the guests with a polite smile. "He's retired. He helps out with the kids." And that was it. Not another word about me. I sat at the table, poking at my salad with a fork, listening to their conversations about stocks, bonds, and new BMW models. I felt like an exhibit in a museum, old, dusty, and uninteresting. One evening during such a dinner, one of the guests, a man in his 50s, recognized me. "Excuse me, aren't you the Ken Whitaker from Aeronautics Lab 105? He asked. "I worked in your department as a young engineer. You were leading that experimental spacecraft project back then. A legend." I smiled. I was pleased to be remembered. "That's right," I replied. We started talking. I enthusiastically recounted old projects, the people, the era of great achievements. And I noticed how Melissa's face darkened. She tried several times to interrupt me, to steer the conversation elsewhere. When the guest stepped away, she leaned toward me and hissed, "Stop it. You don't need to bore people with your stories about dusty blueprints. No one is interested. You're putting Dave in an awkward position." It felt like a punch to the gut. My life, my work, my pride. She called it all dusty blueprints. I looked at Dave. He was sitting at the other end of the table, pretending not to hear anything. He didn't defend me. He just looked away. That night, I realized for the first time that I was losing more than just my daughter-in-law's respect. I was losing my son. He was slowly but surely crossing over to her side, into her new, shiny world, where there was no place for me and my dusty blueprints. After dinner, when the guests had left, I went to the kitchen. Melissa and Dave were cleaning the dishes. "Dave, I need to talk to you," I began. "Pop, I'm exhausted," he replied, not turning around. "Let's talk tomorrow." "No, let's talk now," he sighed and turned around. "I'm listening." "Why did you stay silent when Melissa—" "And what was I supposed to say?" she interrupted, slamming plates into the sink. "That my father is a retiree who lives in the past? Dave works for a modern company now. He needs to fit in, not tell us old war stories. They're not stories. That's my life," I just said. "Pop, Melissa is right," Dave said softly. "Times have changed. You need to be more flexible. You shouldn't showcase things that are so outdated." He said it. "My son, the boy," I taught to read using those very dusty blueprints. He called my leaf outdated. I looked at him, then at Melissa. She stood there, arms crossed, with a look of triumph. She had won. She had completely pulled him over to her side. "I get it," I said. "I won't embarrass you anymore." I turned and walked to my room. The door closed behind me with a soft click. But to me, it was the sound of a wall collapsing. A wall that separated me from my former life, from my son, from everything I believed in. I was alone, completely alone, in the house I had helped them buy, but where I had become a stranger. After that conversation in the kitchen, something irrevocably broke. The 80 wall between them and me became almost tangible. They stopped even pretending I was part of the family. I became a roommate tolerated out of politeness. Silent breakfasts, silent dinners during which they discussed their plans, paying no attention to me whatsoever. I tried to spend as much time as possible out of the house. I walked in the park, went to the library, and hung out in the garage of an old friend, where we spent hours tinkering with engines. But every evening, I had to return to this cold, foreign apartment. Melissa continued her reorganization. One day, I returned home and found a lock on my bedroom door. A common latch lock with a key. "Melissa, what is this?" I asked when she came into the hallway. "It's for your own convenience, Kenneth," she replied with an unflappable look. "We have guests sometimes, and the children run around. This ensures no one accidentally walks in and disturbs you, and your valuables will be safe." She handed me the key, a small, shiny key, to my own prison. I looked at her, trying to meet her gaze, but her eyes were empty, like a porcelain doll's. She spoke of keeping my things safe, but I knew she was really isolating me, walling me off, erasing me from the common space. The grandkids were my only solace. But here, too, Melissa started building walls. "Preston, don't bother Grandpa. He's tired," she'd say when the boy ran up to me to show me his drawing. "Grandpa has his own things to do." Or, "Ava, keep it down. Grandpa's resting." She did it softly, under the pretense of caring for me. But I saw the kids look at her with confusion, not understanding why they suddenly couldn't disturb Grandpa. She was poisoning even these last islands of warmth. The conflict that had been smoldering beneath the surface was ready to erupt, and the reason was soon found. One Saturday, Dave approached me. He fidgeted, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. I immediately knew he was going to ask for money. "Pop, listen, we have this thing," he started. "Mel and I want to buy a mountain retreat. We found a great place outside the city, but we're a little short. Could you help us out?" "How much?" I asked, putting down my book. "Well, about $50,000. $50,000. The amount wasn't small, but I had savings. I'd set them aside for a rainy day or a big gift for the grandkids." "Why do you need a retreat? You two don't like to get your hands dirty with yard work," I said. "Well, it's for status," Dave replied, blushing. "All my colleagues have second homes. We'll invite friends over for cookouts." I see. I thought for a few minutes. On one hand, I didn't want to give them the money, not after everything that had happened. On the other hand, this was my son. And perhaps this was a chance to mend relations somehow. "Fine," I said. "I'll help, but with one condition. We'll document it as a promissory note, interest-free, just so there's a record." Dave's face fell. "A note? Pop, are you serious? We're family." "Precisely because we're family, Dave. There should be honest and clear relations in a family. Money is a serious matter." At that moment, Melissa walked into the room. She must have been listening outside the door. "What promissory note?" she asked in an icy tone. "Don't you trust your only son?" It's not about trust, Melissa. It's about order. Ah, order, she sneered. I get it. You just don't want to help us. You're too cheap to spend money on your own family. I didn't say I wouldn't help. I offered conditions. Conditions? She flared up. You're setting conditions for us in our own house? We took you in. We care for you. And you... Hold on, I interrupted her. In your house? Did you forget that I put up half the cost of this apartment? Free and clear. As a wedding gift to you both? Where was your gratitude then? She fell silent, but only for a second. That was a long time ago. And anyway, that was your fatherly duty. And now, you're demanding some kind of note? You're just a stingy old man. Melissa, stop it, Dave intervened. Stop what? I'm speaking the truth. He sits here with everything provided for, and still sets conditions for us. I'm not sitting here with everything provided for, I said, and my voice became as hard as steel. I help with the grandkids. I pay for utilities out of my pension. I haven't asked you for a dime, and now you want $50,000, and you're not even willing to sign a paper. We're not signing anything, she snapped. If you want to help, help without humiliating conditions. If not, just say so. She spun around and left the room, slamming the door. Dave remained standing, looking bewilderedly between me and the closed door. Pop, why are you doing this? He mumbled. She doesn't mean it. It's just her personality. Personality? I stood up. No, son. That's called something else. And since you're not even willing to take such a simple step as a promissory note, there will be no money. I walked out of the room. I could hear them start arguing behind the wall, her loud, accusatory voice, and his quiet, defensive one. That day, I understood once and for all. There would be no more compromises. They had crossed a line, and now I had to defend myself, not them. I returned to my room and sat at the table. The package from Omaha had arrived yesterday. The rare 6-in-2 tube was nestled in a small box surrounded by cotton. I took it out. Fragile glass, thin filaments inside. I looked at it and thought that human relationships were just as fragile, and once they were shattered, you couldn't glue them back together. You could only try to assemble something new from the fragments. But would it work like before? I didn't know. Refusing to give them the money for the retreat without a note was the spark that ignited a real fire. The atmosphere in the apartment didn't just become cold, it became hostile. Melissa stopped speaking to me entirely. She walked past me as if I were thin air. If I asked her a question, she would answer through Dave, "Tell your father to pass the salt." It was humiliating and petty, but I knew it was her way of applying pressure. Dave was caught between a rock and a hard place. He was torn between his wife and his father, and as always, he chose the path of least resistance. He simply tried to avoid me. He came home from work later and retreated to his room, claiming exhaustion. Our conversations were reduced to short, meaningless phrases. "Hey, how are you?" "Fine." He was ashamed. I saw it in his eyes. Ashamed of his weakness, his cowardice, but he couldn't or wouldn't do anything. The grandkids remained the only bright spot. But even here, Melissa continued her campaign. She signed them up for every possible activity in class. English lessons, swimming, chess, art. Now after pre-K and school, she picked them up herself. My help was no longer needed. I only saw the children late at night, tired and sleepy. "Grandpa, why don't you pick me up from school anymore?" Preston asked once. "It's boring riding with Mom. You always tell stories." "Mom decided it would be better this way, son," I answered, stroking his head. "She wants to spend more time with you." I couldn't tell him the truth. I couldn't tell him that his mother was methodically squeezing me out of their lives. My patience was running out. I was increasingly thinking that it was time to leave, to return to my old, empty apartment. Yes, it would be lonely there, but I would be the master of my own house. No one would humiliate me there. I had already started mentally packing my things when they delivered the next blow. One evening, they both walked into my room without knocking. Dave stood slightly behind Melissa, who was in front, arms crossed. Her posture expressed determination and aggression. "Kenneth, we need to have a serious talk," she began without preamble. "I'm listening, Ethan," I said, putting down the radio schematic. "We've talked things over and concluded that the current situation is unacceptable to us." "What situation exactly?" "You're living here," she snapped. "We think it's only fair for you to contribute your share to the family budget." I chuckled. "I thought we closed that topic. I pay for utilities." "That's not enough." Her voice rose. "Groceries, cleaning supplies, internet. All of it costs money. Dave works hard to provide for all of us. And you? You just live here. Your pension is pennies compared to our expenses. So we decided you will give us your entire pension completely." I looked at Dave. He was standing there, eyes fixed on the floor. "Dave, is this your decision too?" I asked. He finally looked up at me. There was agony in his eyes. "Pop, please try to understand. Melissa is right. The expenses are huge. And what do you need your pension for? We feed you. We clothe you. Feed me." I stood up. "Son, I don't believe I have ever asked you for a piece of bread. I live on my own money. And my pension, just so you know, doesn't go to my whims. I opened 2 trust accounts for Preston and Ava, and I transfer money there every month. By the time they come of age, there will be decent sums for college, for a first car, for things you, in your chase for status, probably won't be able to give them." Melissa's face showed astonishment, which quickly turned to anger. "What accounts? You had no right to handle money without our knowledge." "It's my money, Melissa, and I have every right to dispose of it as I see fit. And I believe investing in my grandchildren's future is the most correct decision." "Oh, is that right?" She took a step closer to me. "So you have money for the grandkids, but not for the family that supports you?" "I repeat, you do not support me." "That's it! I've had enough," she screamed. "If that's how it is, then here is our ultimatum. Either you close those ridiculous accounts and give us the pension, or what?" I asked, looking her straight in the eyes. "Or you move out of this apartment. Tomorrow." Dave flinched. "Mel, wait. That's too much." "Shut up," she cut him off. "I decide what's too much and what isn't. I am the mistress of this house." She stood before me, face red and distorted with rage, and in that moment, I felt nothing but pity and disgust for her. She was like a small, greedy animal, ready to do anything for her own gain. "Fine," I said quietly. "What's fine?" She didn't understand. "I'll move out tomorrow." They both froze. They hadn't expected that answer. They thought I would argue, beg, or bargain. They thought I was afraid of loneliness, that I was clinging to this life beside them. They didn't understand the main thing. I wasn't afraid. I was simply tired. Tired of their lies, their pettiness, their betrayal. You're serious?" Dave stammered. "Absolutely. I'll pack my things in the morning. Thank you for your hospitality." I turned my back and sat at my desk, letting them know the conversation was over. They stood there in silence for a little while longer, and then they left. I could hear their muffled argument outside the door But I didn't care anymore. The decision had been made. I was leaving. And I was leaving not because they kicked me out, but because I could no longer breathe the same air as them. This was the end of my illusions, and the beginning of my war. The night before I left was long and almost sleepless. I didn't pack my things. I sat in the silence of my room and said goodbye. I wasn't saying goodbye to the apartment or the furniture, but to 35 years of my life connected to my son. I sifted through my memories. There he is taking his first step, holding on to my finger. There we are, flying a kite together. There he is, all grown up, standing next to me at Vivian's funeral, and I feel supported by his shoulder. Where did it all go? How could love and respect evaporate, giving way to cold calculation and indifference? I understood that it wasn't just about Melissa. She was the catalyst, the litmus test that revealed all the weakness and unpleasantness in Dave's soul. He traded his father for comfort, traded his mother's memory for new furniture, traded his conscience for the approval of his overbearing wife. And that was the bitterest part of it all. I got up early in the morning, as always. I gathered a small bag, clothes, documents, a few books, and Vivian's photo. I decided to leave the radio for now. It was too bulky. I would pick it up later. When I went into the kitchen, Melissa was already there. She was drinking coffee and looking at me with satisfaction. Triumph was visible in her eyes. She had won. She had gotten rid of the old junk. "Good morning," I said. She only nodded in response. Dave came out of the bedroom. He looked worn out. I knew he hadn't slept. "Pop, you're really leaving?" he asked. "Yes, Dave, just as you wanted. Maybe we should talk some more. We said everything we needed to say yesterday." I replied. I walked over to the door. The grandkids were still asleep. I didn't wake them. I didn't want them to see this scene. I just quietly peeked into their room. Preston was asleep, hugging a teddy bear. Ava was spread out on the bed like a starfish. My heart clenched with pain. I wasn't just leaving my son and daughter-in-law. I was leaving them, too. "I'll call," I told Dave, standing at the threshold, "to arrange when I can see the grandkids." "Of course, Pop. Of course," he mumbled. I walked out and closed the door behind me. Going down in the elevator, I felt not bitterness, but a strange relief, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from my shoulders. I was free. Free from their manipulations, their humiliations, and their world built on lies. My old apartment greeted me with silence and the smell of dust. Everything here was just as it had been 3 years ago. Our old photos on the walls, her favorite books on the shelves. I opened the windows, letting in the fresh morning air. It was time to start a new life. The first few days were the hardest. The loneliness, which had previously been just a background hum, now became deafening. I wandered around the apartment, not knowing what to do with myself. I called Dave to arrange a visit with the grandkids, but he kept making excuses. "Pop, now's not the best time. Melissa, she's not in the mood. Dave, I have a right to see my grandkids." "I know, Pop. I'll call you next week." But he didn't call. I knew Melissa had forbidden him to. She had decided to completely erase me from their lives. And, once again, he had submitted. I tried to keep busy. I went to my old garage that I hadn't sold. I tinkered with my friend's motorcycle, helping him with repairs. But my thoughts always returned to the house, to the grandkids. I knew this couldn't go on. I had to do something. And so, one day, sitting in my empty apartment, I made a decision. If they didn't want it to play fair, we would play by my rules. The rules that life had taught me. The rules of an engineer, a builder, a man who knows that every system has a vulnerability. And I knew their most vulnerable point. It was Dave's career. I remembered that call with Simon Sterling. I remembered how he had said, "For a talented engineer coming from Ken Whitaker, the light is always green at my company." The key words there were from Ken Whitaker. Simon gave Dave that job not because Dave was a genius, but out of respect for me. And neither Dave nor Melissa understood this. They thought it was their merit, their victory. They didn't know how precariously their new shiny prosperity hung by a single thread. I found Simon's old business card. On it, in addition to the printed information, his personal mobile number and a short phrase were written in his handwriting. "Ken, if you ever need anything, call me anytime." I put that card in my pocket. I didn't know when I would use it, but I knew that moment would come. Another week passed. I lived in my isolation. No calls, no messages. They had cut me out, and that freed my hands. My love and patience had run out. All that remained was cold calculation. I waited for the right moment to strike. I knew they would provide it. Their arrogance and greed were bound to lead to a mistake someday. I was prepared to wait. I sat in silence in the evenings, drinking my cold tea and thinking. I ran through options in my head. I drew up schematics. I prepared for my final, decisive battle. And I knew I would win, because unlike them, I knew what their world truly rested on. And I held the lever capable of bringing that world down. The moment I was waiting for came 2 weeks after I moved out. It was a Tuesday. Preston called me in the morning. He called secretly from a classmate's phone. "Grandpa, hi," he whispered into the receiver. "Preston, what's wrong, sweetheart? Why are you whispering?" "Mom took my tablet. She said I shouldn't talk to you. Grandpa, she's mean. She keeps yelling at Dad, saying we don't have money for a new car because of you." I gasped. "Preston, don't talk about your mother like that. She's just stressed." "No." His whisper turned into a choked sob. "She said you left us. But you didn't leave us, did you?" "No, sweetheart, of course not. I love you very much." "I love you too, Grandpa." "I miss you." "Me too, Preston. Very much." The call ended abruptly. Someone must have walked in. I sat with the phone in my hand, my blood boiling. She was turning the children against me. She was lying to them. That was the last straw. I decided I had waited long enough. It was time to act. I called Dave. "We need to talk today. About the children." "Pop, I can't. I have a meeting. Later." "I'm not asking if you can or cannot." I cut him off. "At 6 this evening, at your apartment. I'll be there." I hung up without waiting for an answer. I was on edge all day. I didn't know what I would say to them. I just felt that I had to look them in the eye. I arrived exactly at 6 o'clock. Melissa opened the door. She looked at me with undisguised hatred. "What do you want?" "I came to talk to my son. He's not here. He'll be here in 10 minutes. "I'll wait." I walked into the apartment without waiting for an invitation and went into the living room. The new furniture they had finally bought gleamed with glossy surfaces. Those same abstract paintings hung on the walls. The house looked like a soulless, cold exhibition hall. Dave arrived 15 minutes later. Seeing me, he tensed. "Pop, is something urgent?" "Yes. Preston called me." Dave's face went white. What did he say? He said you forbid him to talk to me. He said you lie to him, saying that I abandoned him. What's going on, Dave? It was Melissa's decision, he stammered. She thinks it'll be calmer for them this way. Less stress. Less stress, I raised my voice. You deprive your children of their grandfather and call it less stress? Are you out of your mind? What do you want from us? Melissa intervened, walking into the room. Do you expect us to welcome your calls after you refused to help your family? I refuse to participate in your scams, not to help my family. Enough, she screamed. I'm tired of you, of your reproaches, of your constant dissatisfaction. You live in the last century. You don't understand how life works now. But I understand what conscience and honor are, I said. And you seem to have forgotten the meaning of those words. Get out, she shrieked. Get out of my house. I will leave, but remember this, both of you. You are making a huge mistake. I walked out, slamming the door. Rage choked me. I walked down the street without looking where I was going. I knew that peaceful negotiations were over. Now, there would be war. I hadn't eaten for almost 24 hours. Anger and resentment were burning me out from the inside. Wednesday evening, I felt that hunger was finally taking its toll. I decided to return, not to make amends, but to retrieve my radio. I couldn't leave it with them. It was the only thing that connected me to my father, to my past. I decided I would go in when they weren't home. I arrived around 9 o'clock in the evening. The lights in the windows were off. I opened the door with my key and walked in. The apartment was quiet. I went to my former room and carefully packed the radio into a box. It was heavy. I carried it out to the hallway and decided to grab a glass of water before I left. My stomach was cramping with hunger. I went into the kitchen, flipped the light switch, and froze. A large padlock was hanging on the refrigerator door. A real iron padlock. Next to it, a piece of paper was attached with a magnet. I moved closer. In Melissa's crude, malicious handwriting, it was written, "Food is only for those who contribute to the family. No freeloaders allowed." I stood there, staring at that lock, at that note, and I couldn't believe my eyes. This was the bottom, the absolute hopeless bottom. This was no longer just pettiness. It was demonstrative and sophisticated cruelty. To deprive an old man, her husband's father, of food. The apartment door opened. They walked in. Melissa, Dave, and the children. They had returned from the mall with shopping bags. Seeing me in the kitchen, they froze. "What are you doing here?" Melissa was the first to recover. I silently pointed to the refrigerator. "Ah, that," she sneered. "Yes, I decided it was only fair. Enough eating at our expense. Now you'll earn every single crumb. If you want to eat, pay up." Preston and Ava looked at us with frightened eyes. Preston clung to Dave's leg. "Dave," I said softly, looking at my son, Did you know about this?" He looked away. "Melissa thinks that?" "What do you say, Dave?" I didn't take my eyes off him. He was silent. He stood there and said nothing while his wife humiliated his father in front of his children. And in that moment, all my pain, all my resentment vanished. Only coldness remained. A coldness, pure as steel, of contempt. "I see," I said. I slowly reached into the inner pocket of my jacket, pulled out the old worn business card, and handed it to Dave. "What is this?" he asked. "Take a look." He took the card and read it. At first, he didn't understand. Then his eyes widened. He looked from the card to me and then back to the card. His face began to slowly change. The flush left his cheeks. It turned gray, then almost green. His lips trembled. He looked at me with such terror, as if he had seen a ghost. He finally understood. The silence in the kitchen became thick, ringing. The children, sensing trouble, froze. Melissa looked at us, baffled, not understanding what was happening. And Dave continued to stare at the card in his hand, as if it were red hot. His breathing became fast and ragged. This is Sterling, he whispered. Simon Sterling. My boss. Not just your boss, Dave, I said calmly, and my voice sounded deafeningly loud in the silence. He's my old friend and my former student, the one I helped get on his feet once, the one who gave you the job out of respect for me. Melissa scoffed. What nonsense! Dave went through 5 interviews. He was hired for his talent. Yes, I looked at my son. Tell her, Dave. Tell her how your talent couldn't find a decent job for 6 months. Tell her how you sent your resume to Apex 3 times and didn't even get a response. And then, suddenly, after my phone call, you were invited for a private meeting with the owner. Dave was silent. He just stood there, and the collapse of his entire world was visible on his face. All his pride, all his self-importance, built on this new position, crumbled to dust. He wasn't a talented engineer who had climbed the ladder. He was just a protege, a friend's son. Now read what's written on the back, I continued. He looked at the card again. On the reverse side, written in blue ink, was the phrase, Ken, if you ever need anything, call me anytime. What? What does that mean? Melissa asked, starting to realize the seriousness of the situation. It means, Melissa, I shifted my cold gaze to her, that all your prosperity, your Caribbean trips, your new furniture, and your status life hangs on one phone call from me. One single call, and I can make it right now. Melissa's face twisted. She rushed to the refrigerator, trying to open the lock with trembling hands. Dave, where's the key? Open this immediately. But Dave didn't hear her. He took a step toward me. Pop, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I thought... You didn't think, Dave, I cut him off. That's your main problem. You never think. You just drift along on the current created by your wife. She puts a lock on the refrigerator to humiliate your father. You stay silent. She turns your children against their grandfather. You stay silent. She throws me out of the house. You stay silent. Where is your voice, son? Where is your spine? Take this off. Take it off now. Melissa was yelling, yanking at the lock. And then Dave exploded. He spun around to her, and for the first time in many years, I saw real fury in his eyes. Shut up, he roared, startling the children. This is all you, with your greed, with your ambitions. You ruined everything. He rushed to the refrigerator and ripped the lock off with a single heave, tearing off a piece of the plastic door. Jars rattled, something shattered. Do you realize what you've done? He yelled, pointing his finger at her. He can fire me right now, and we'll be left with nothing. We'll be ruined because of your stupidity. She looked at him, frightened, not recognizing her compliant, manageable husband. I didn't know. Well, you should have known. You should have thought with your head, not your wallet. He turned back to me. His face was wet with tears. He fell to his knees. Pop, please forgive me. I'll fix everything. I'll talk to her. I'll make her apologize. Just don't call him. Please, I beg you, don't call. He crawled at my feet, grasping at my pants. It was a pathetic sight, and I looked at him without pity, because I saw that he was motivated not by repentance, not by love for his father, but by animal fear. The fear of losing his job, his money, his status. He was begging for forgiveness, not for the humiliation he caused, but for getting caught. Ava started crying. Preston walked up and hugged my leg. "Grandpa, don't leave," he whispered. I stroked his head. "I won't leave, little man. Not now." I looked at my son, who was still kneeling. "Get up," I said quietly. "Don't humiliate yourself any further." He slowly got up. Melissa stood by the wall, covering her face with her hands. I'll make dinner," she stammered. "Kenneth, you must be hungry?" "No, Melissa," I replied. "I'm not hungry. My appetite is gone." I turned to Dave. "We'll talk tomorrow morning. And now I need to think." I took my grandson's hand and walked to their room. I needed to be with them. I needed to feel something real after all this farce. Dave and Melissa remained in the kitchen amidst the shards of a broken jar, the ripped-off lock, and their shattered illusions. I knew they wouldn't sleep that night, and I knew that tomorrow's conversation would be the most important one of their lives. Only they didn't yet realize that I had already made my decision, and they wouldn't like it. I spent the evening with my grandkids. We read books and built that same spaceport that Preston had started last time. Ava colored. She drew our family, me, Preston, herself, and Dave. Melissa wasn't in the picture. Children sense dishonesty better than any lie detector. When they fell asleep, I quietly left their room. A deathly silence hung over the apartment. The light was only on in the kitchen. I peered in. Dave and Melissa were sitting at the table opposite each other. They weren't talking. They just sat there like two strangers who had accidentally been locked in the same room. Their faces showed confusion and fear. I didn't speak to them. I went to my former room. It was empty and impersonal. My things, my radio, everything had been moved out. Only the bare walls remained. I lay down on the sofa they had put in place of my bed and stared at the ceiling. Thoughts flowed slowly, heavily, like cold tar. I thought about Dave, about his tears, about his humiliation. Was there even a drop of sincerity in them? I replayed the scene in the kitchen over and over. He exploded. Yes. But who did he yell at? Melissa. Why? Because she set him up. Because she jeopardized his career, his prosperity. Not a single word about the fact that she had humiliated me. Not a single word about how low and cruel it was. All his rage was dictated by fear for his own skin. He was afraid of losing his job, not of losing his father. And that was the most terrifying realization. I thought about my late wife. Vivian, what would you say if you saw this? You always said I was too strict with him, that he needed more freedom. I gave him freedom. And this is where it led. He grew up spineless, irresponsible, unable to distinguish right from wrong. He became his wife's shadow, a compliant executor of her basest desires. No, Vivian, I wasn't too strict. I was too soft. I forgave too long. I loved too much. My love became a crutch for him, one he leaned on his whole life. He got used to me always being there, always backing him up, always solving his problems. And now, facing the real consequences of his actions, he habitually fell to his knees and began to beg for help. Not for forgiveness, for help. The difference was crucial. I got up and walked to the window. The streetlights were burning in the courtyard below. A rare car drove by. The world was living its own life, and I realized that I, too, had to live. Live my own life, not the life of my son, his wife, and their problems. Enough. I had fulfilled the promise I made to Vivian. I raised my son. I was there until he stood on his own 2 feet. But I didn't promise her I would carry him for the rest of his life. I didn't promise to let him and his wife wipe their feet on me. Something clicked inside me. That cold backbone that appeared after their ultimatum hardened and turned into armor. The decision was final and irrevocable. I wouldn't take revenge on them. Revenge is for the weak. I would simply remove them from my life. I would cut them off, like a surgeon cuts off a gangrenous limb, to save the entire body. I wouldn't call Simon and ask him to fire Dave. That would be too simple, and it would once again be my decision, my interference in his life. No, I would give him a chance to choose for himself who he wants to be. But I would no longer be his safety net. I got up early in the morning, as usual, washed up, got dressed, and gathered the last few small items I found in the closet into my old bag. When I walked into the kitchen, they were already there. They sat at the table, waiting for me. They looked like defendants before the verdict was read. "Pop," Dave began, jumping up, "and we talked everything over. We were wrong. Forgive us." Melissa stood beside him, head lowered. "Forgive me, Kenneth. I lost my temper." They apologized, but I looked at them and felt nothing. Their words were empty, like husks. "Sit down," I said. "The conversation will be short." They sat. "I'm leaving," I said. "For good." "Pop, please don't," Dave cried out. "We'll fix everything." "You won't fix anything, Dave, because you don't understand what needs fixing. You're apologizing not because you've recognized your cruelty, but because you're scared of the consequences. Those are 2 different things." I took the business card out of my pocket and placed it on the table. "I won't be calling Simon. Your career is in your hands. If you're a good specialist, you'll hold on to that job. If not, that's your problem. But know this, you no longer have this business card. That safety cushion is gone. From this day on, you live on your own." I looked at Melissa. "And you too, Melissa. You want a beautiful life? Work for it alongside your husband, not by humiliating old men." "But what about the grandkids?" Dave pleaded. "I will see the grandkids, but not here, on neutral territory, in the park, at a coffee shop, anywhere, but not in this house. I'll call you when I'm ready." I picked up my bag. "Pop, wait." He rushed toward me. "Where will you go?" "Don't worry, son. Unlike you, I built my home a long time ago, and it's always waiting for me." I opened the door. He stood in the doorway, bewildered, frightened, like a child left alone in a dark forest. "Goodbye, Dave. It's time to grow up." I walked out and closed the door behind me. I didn't look back. I walked down the hall, took the elevator down, and stepped out onto the street. And with every step, I felt an invisible but incredibly heavy burden falling from my shoulders. I was free, and I was walking toward my new, real life. I stepped onto the street, and the cold morning air hit my face. The sky was still gray, but to me, it seemed clear. I took a deep breath, then another, the air of freedom. I didn't feel like a victor. I felt no malice. I only felt silence inside, the kind I had missed for so long. I didn't drive straight to my old apartment. I went downtown to a small, cozy coffee shop that served the best coffee in the city. I sat by the window, ordered a large cappuccino and a croissant. I sat there, drinking coffee, watching people rushing to their affairs, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like not a piece, of someone else's game, but simply a person. A person with a choice. I took out my phone and found Simon Sterling's number. I stared at it for a long time. Should I call or not? On one hand, I promised Dave I wouldn't interfere. On the other, I felt I had to explain myself to Simon. I had recommended someone to him, after all. I carried a moral responsibility for that. I dialed the number. Ken. Hey, Simon's voice was cheerful and energetic. Haven't heard from you in forever. How's it going, old man? How's your protege doing? Still working? He's working, I said. For now. That's what I wanted to talk about. Something wrong? Is he underperforming? He's performing, I said. Technically. I think he's a good specialist. I trained him. The problem isn't that. I paused, choosing my words carefully. Simon, I need to tell you something. I made a mistake when I vouched for him. I shouldn't have mixed personal and business matters. Ken, cut to the chase. What happened? A seriousness entered Simon's voice, and I told him. Not everything. No dirty details about the refrigerator lock. No humiliating scenes. I simply explained that we had a serious family conflict, and that my son, under his wife's influence, had behaved, to put it mildly, poorly. I moved out, I finished. And I want you to know, I'm withdrawing my recommendation. Evaluate him purely as an employee, without considering our friendship. If he's valuable to the company, let him work. If not, fire him. Without a second thought. My request is no longer active. Silence hung on the other end of the line. I understand, Simon finally said. His voice was cold. So, he betrayed you. These are our family matters. I dodged the direct answer. No, Ken. They're not just family matters anymore. A man who doesn't respect his father won't respect the company he works for. A man capable of cruelty toward his loved ones is capable of cruelty in business. That's an axiom. Simon, I'm not asking you to fire him. I'm not asking, he interrupted. I'm drawing my own conclusions. We have not just technical, but corporate standards here. And one of them is integrity. Thank you for calling and telling me the truth. You're a real friend. I just didn't want to let you down. You didn't let me down. You warned me. And that's the most valuable thing. All right, old man, hang in there. If you need anything, you have my number. Thanks, Simon. We said our goodbyes. I put the phone on the table. A strange feeling settled over my soul. Did I want Dave fired, or didn't I? I couldn't even be sure myself. I just did what I thought was right. I removed the responsibility for him from my shoulders. His path, his decision, his life was ahead of him. I finished my coffee and walked out onto the street. The rain had stopped. The sun peeked out from behind the clouds. I walked on foot. I just walked through the streets of my hometown, which I felt I was seeing for the first time. I went into a bookstore, bought a few books I had long wanted. Then I stopped at a music store and found an old jazz record. I was truly returning to my own life. In the evening, sitting in my quiet apartment, I listened to jazz and read a book. My phone was silent. I was sure Dave and Melissa were in a panic right now. They were probably waiting for my call, waiting for me to come back, for everything to go back to normal. They didn't understand that nothing would ever be normal again. And I thought that fear is a poor counselor. Fear made Dave betray me. Fear made him grovel. But fear cannot force a person to change. Only true realization can bring about change. And my son was still very far from that. I didn't know what Simon would do, whether he would fire Dave or give him a chance. That was his decision now. My mission was complete. I had set all the pieces on the board, and now the game had to proceed without my involvement. I brewed myself some strong tea, pulled down my old, trusty soldering station, and the box of radio parts from the shelf. It was time to return to real work, to what brought joy, not pain, to what could be fixed with a clear mind and skillful hands, unlike human souls, which, once broken, never sound quite the same again. A week passed. In that week, I did more in my old apartment than I had in the last 3 years. I cleared the clutter on the balcony, fixed the squeaky bathroom door, and repainted the walls in the hall. Working with my hands, simple, understandable physical labor, was a better remedy for the soul than any therapist. I was restoring my home, and with it, restoring myself. The radio was transforming too. I finally installed that tube from Omaha and replaced all the dried-out capacitors. The sound was becoming cleaner, deeper. Soon it would truly sing. There was no word from Dave or Melissa. They hadn't called. They probably thought I was bluffing, that my leaving was just a demonstration, a way to pressure them. They were waiting for me to cool off and return. They still didn't understand that the bridges were burned. On Friday evening, just as I was finishing the receiver alignment, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. I answered. "Kenneth?" An uncertain male voice asked. "Yes, this is Dave Whitaker." He was calling from a strange number. "What happened, Dave?" "Pop." His voice was trembling. I was fired. They called me into human resources today and gave me my pink slip. Said I didn't pass the trial period. No explanation. "Pop, was it you?" "No, Dave," I answered calmly. "It was you." "I don't understand," he was almost yelling. "I did great work. They complimented me. Simon himself said I was a valuable asset. Apparently he changed his mind. But why? What did I do wrong? Are you sure you want to hear this?" "Yes." "Fine. You betrayed your father. You allowed your wife to humiliate him. You kept silent when he was deprived of food in front of your children. A man capable of that cannot be a reliable employee. He is capable of betraying the company too. Simon understands that. He's a smart man." Silence hung on the other end of the line. I only heard his ragged, heavy breathing. "But what am I supposed to do now?" he whispered. "We have loans, a mortgage. Melissa, she'll kill me." "That's your life, Dave. Your family, your problems. You chose this path yourself. Now walk it to the end." "Pop, please, call him. Ask him for me. I'll do anything. I'll crawl on my knees. I'll beg for forgiveness." "Too late, Dave. Knees are not an argument. You ask for forgiveness, not when you're cornered, but when your conscience won't let you sleep. And your conscience, it seems, was sleeping soundly until today." "But I'm your son." "Yes, and that's why I'm so hurt and ashamed of you. But I can't live your life for you. Enough." I hung up the phone. My hands were shaking slightly. It was a hard conversation, but it was necessary. I had cut the last thread, his last hope that I would solve everything for him again. I sat in the armchair. The jazz I was listening to before the call seemed inappropriate. I turned off the music. In the silence, I thought about what would happen next. Melissa, hearing about the firing, would give him hell. Their beautiful world, built on big money, would collapse like a house of cards. They would have to sell the new furniture, cancel the Caribbean trip, and learn to live within their means. Perhaps this crisis would force them to grow up, or perhaps it would destroy their family for good. But that would no longer be my story. The phone rang again. This time, it was Melissa. I didn't pick up. She called about 10 times. Then the texts started coming. You are a monster. You ruined your son's life. I hate you. Then the tone changed. Kenneth, I was wrong. Let's forget everything. Dave will find another job. We can handle it. Just don't abandon us. And finally, the last one. What do we do? I deleted all the messages without replying. The answer to her question was simple. Live. Just live. Honestly, with a clear conscience. But I doubted they knew how to do that. 2 days later, Simon called me. Well, old man, how are you? Fine. Finished setting up the radio yesterday. The sound is divine. Good. Healing your soul then. Smart. Listen, I'm calling about your former protege. What about him? He came in today, asking for his job back. Said he'd realized everything. That he was wrong. And what did you do? I told him the same thing you did. That forgiveness isn't asked for out of fear, and that the doors of my company are closed to him forever. Harsh, but fair, I replied. You know what the funniest part is? He tried to blackmail me, said he'd tell everyone I hired based on favoritism. I laughed in his face. Ken, I am grateful to you to the grave for what you did for me, and I'm proud of our friendship. And if anyone thinks that helping the son of my best friend is favoritism, then I don't care about their opinion. Thanks, Simon. Don't mention it. You would have done the same. All right, old man, take care and come visit when you have time. The cognac is on me. I will. I hung up the phone and smiled. For the first time in a long time, it was a true, genuine smile. The world wasn't perfect. There was a lot of cruelty and betrayal in it. But there was also true friendship, honor, and fairness. And that was what made life worth living. 3 months passed. Autumn fully came into its own, painting the city in crimson and gold. My life had settled into a new, calm rhythm. I walked often, read, met with old friends I had neglected in recent years, and, of course, listened to my radio. Its warm tube sound filled the apartment with the comfort and peace I had missed so much. I heard almost nothing about Dave and Melissa. I only knew that they had sold their expensive car to pay off some of their debts. Dave, as mutual acquaintances told me, got a job at a small engineering firm. The salary there was significantly less, but he didn't have a choice. Reputation in our professional circle is a serious thing. Rumors of his firing from Apex had spread quickly. One Saturday, the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole. Dave was standing on the threshold alone. He was holding a cake. I opened the door. Hi, Pop, he said quietly. Can I come in? I silently stepped aside, letting him in. He walked into the kitchen and put the cake on the table. He looked thinner, tired. The polish and the overconfidence were gone. Standing before me was simply my 35-year-old son, who, it seemed, was facing real hardship for the first time in his life. How are you? I asked. Fine. Working. It's tough, of course, after Apex, but it's fine. And Melissa? He chuckled. A bitter, joyless sound. Melissa is learning to live without the Caribbean. She recently got a job as an administrator at a beauty salon. Said she'd rather do that than sit at home and wait for me to become successful again. I see. We paused. Pop, I didn't come here for that, he finally said. I came to apologize. For real. Without fear. Without ultimatums. Just forgive me. I was blind and deaf. I was a coward. And I almost lost the only thing I truly valued, you. He looked me straight in the eyes, and in his gaze, I saw no lies, no cunning, only pain and genuine remorse. "I don't know if you can ever forgive me completely," he continued, "but I want you to know I understand everything. Every day, I wake up and fall asleep, thinking about what an idiot I was." I remained silent for a long time. I looked at him, and two feelings fought within me: the hurt that still lived somewhere deep in my soul, and a father's love, which, as it turned out, no amount of betrayal could kill. "Want some tea?" I asked. He nodded. "I do." I put on the kettle. We sat in my old kitchen, drank tea with cake, and talked. For the first time in many years, we spoke about his new job, about my winter plans, about books, about the weather, not about the past, but about the present. And it was the most important conversation of our lives. When he was leaving, he stopped at the door. "Pop, can I bring the grandkids over on the weekends? They miss you so much." "Of course you can, son," I replied. "Bring them." He left, and I remained standing by the window, watching him go. I didn't know what would happen next. Would he and Melissa be able to save their family? Would Dave be able to truly grow up? But I knew one thing. Today, he had taken the first step, the hardest one, the step from fear toward conscience. The next day, I called him myself. "Dave, hey, it's me. Listen, I have this radio. One part is acting up. A contact is loose in the amplifier. I can't handle it alone. My hands aren't what they used to be. Could you stop by and help?" Silence hung on the other end of the line. And then I heard his quiet, choked voice. "Of course, Pop. I'll be right there." I knew everything would be fine. Not immediately, not easily, but we would manage, because as long as we're alive, we always have a chance to fix what is broken, whether it's an old radio or human relationships. The main thing is to find the right schematic and have enough patience and love to solder the broken connections. Did you like my story? If you listened till the end, drop a number 1 in the comments. If you enjoyed it, you can support me by liking the video and sending a small tip. I've got lots of other life stories like this on my channel, so make sure to subscribe and check them out. I've added 2 new stories on screen that everyone loves. Thanks for being here. See you in the next one. With love.